Bruce joined the Unitarian Church in Meadville, Pennsylvania, back when the dinosaurs ruled the earth, as my kids like to say. Then he dropped out for a few decades until B. Egger brought him back into the fold a couple of years ago, and now he's with us here today. Bruce is a retired environmental planner. He began his life in Canada and spent his early years here. Later, after receiving his master's degree in planning from Harvard University, he spent the bulk of his professional career in the United States, initially working for regional planning and environmental agencies in Illinois, Washington, and New York. Later, he established his own environmental consulting firm in New York, and over a couple of decades, undertook a number of environmental studies in several US states, as well as Canada. Together with his wife, he retired to Bowen Island, and much later he moved to West Van, where he lives now. And he asked me to say that he would be delighted to talk with you after, at coffee time, to engage in dialogue about what he has to say to us today. Bruce?
Thank you, Mark. I was going to say, what a beautiful day, but it isn't. So I thought we might do a chant to nature, which is, nature, bring back the sun. So everyone, bring back the sun. Bring back the sun. Okay. Anyway, what I want to do is to talk to you about nature and about mankind and how we interact and how that's changed over the years. But I have a little question for you, which always has bothered me, and so I'll bring it to you. If a man is alone in a forest and he speaks his mind and no woman is present, is he still wrong? Think about that. Anyway, I'm here to talk about nature and about humanity and how we interact. A better understanding has evolved over the past few decades, and it's actually changed the way we think about nature and about ourselves. I will also dwell on a few other topics such as human population, diseases, ancient gods, and I'll even dabble a bit in philosophy. But let's start first with how age affects your understanding, how getting older perhaps makes you more informed or even smarter, or anyway it should. Now, some friends around my age come up with things like, well, I'm getting on a bit, or it sort of goes with the flow as you edge up in age. But you can truthfully say that things like, I've been there, I know what it's like, I've seen that before. And you know, older people are right in making those statements, because if anything is true about getting older, you gain experience and knowledge. So that's where I start off, talking about something that I believe is truly a significant change in how humans and nature get on with each other. It's happened over the past 40 to 50 years, and I can say I've been there and I've done that because, along with many others, I've been involved with the environmental movement very much from the beginning. And it's been quite a ride. To provide some perspective, if you were born in 1970, around the time the environmental age began, you'd be about 46 years old today. And could you believe that Greenpeace was established here in Vancouver in 1971? That's just 45 years ago. And if so, you were born at the beginning of the environmental age. As to my own past, as Mark indicated, I retired back to Canada after I was born here and spent my youth here, but I did work in the US for about 30 years, and that was essentially in the environmental movement. So I got caught up early in the environmental issues early on. In the 1960s, I was involved in getting a pioneering environmental agency up and running in New York State. And some years I became a consultant, and we did, with an office in New York, and we did work throughout the US and also in Canada. So I know that Canada followed the US in its evolution toward environmental concerns and environmental law, but I'm not too familiar with what Canada did. I'm more conversant with the US experience. Excuse me. And what happened in the US is they passed a law in 1969 called the National Environmental Policy Act. And so that began the whole movement governmentally in the US, and of course it's transferred into Canada as well. I got myself involved early on in environmentalism, and I came to know something about it. And looking back, the environmental movement created a whole new perspective on how human society and nature coexist. In the years since then, it's come to dominate how we live, but it happens so steadily and so slowly that we really don't comprehend how much things have changed. But in fact, our mindset has been reset. To provide some idea of what all this has meant, I'm going to give you a few examples of the changes that have occurred over the past several decades, which we often take for granted. Automobiles. Remember pictures of Los Angeles shrouded in automobile smog? It was a picture of civilization gone haywire. Well, that's gone. California started to regulate automobile exhausts and kept raising up the standards every few years. Result, it became the norm everywhere in the US and in much of the world. And today the skies over LA, Los Angeles, are clear. Plus, we're now up and running with environmental vehicles, which is a big change. However, worldwide, the change is uneven. China is still trying to figure it out, but they'll come to the same conclusion, in my view, as the US and Canada has done. Industry used to dump its waste in the closest nearby waterway, and that's over. Wastewater treatment is required everywhere these days, as is the disposal of untreated mine waste here in BC. People used to think that animal and bird habitats were best filled with dirt and built over. Not today. Nature takes precedence now. Think about wind power and solar power. There wasn't any 40 or 50 years ago. Now they're everywhere. Granted, here in BC, we have a lot of water power, so solar and wind aren't as important. But water power is non-polluting. Think about the way you live. You or your folks may remember a time when everything went out with the garbage. You don't do that anymore. You separate your throwaways and recycle. It's environmentally correct. Hardly anyone ever heard about global warming 30 or 40 years ago. Now it's a worldwide issue, and there are international agreements to limit it. My, what a change that's been. Humanity now understands that we humans have so worsened the world's climate that even the height of worldwide oceans could go up, and thus many coastal areas will be permanently flooded, like parts of Florida, for example, or even here in Richmond, a city which is almost at sea level. Or take changes in professional organizations like law and economics. We now have specialists in the field, environmental lawyers and environmental economists, and they're here to stay. And how about natural food? Natural food. Actually, I haven't heard about unnatural food, but anyway, natural food is now big. So anyway, simply put, over the past 40 to 50 years, we've changed dramatically from thinking about nature as something to dominate and replaced it with an understanding that nature is something to be respected. It's a new concept of how we live our lives on this planet Earth. The way it works nowadays, when you set out to do anything big, You have to present in detail what the expected impacts to the environment will be and how you're going to deal with them. It's called an environmental impact statement. Anyway, that's the gee whiz stuff. So now back to the future. What should we expect to happen in the next 30, 40, or 50 years? First of all, nature is going to be even more intertwined with human life. In fact, humans will start to understand that how nature goes is how humanity will go. We'll finally realize that we're not just the top of the heap. We'll understand that we are a part of nature, because that's what we are. Every living thing on this planet is a product of nature. And mankind, actually humankind, is just one of nature's gambles. Yes, we're a gamble. Like everything else that nature creates and which lives on this earth, and nature can dispose of us if it sees fit. Take the Black Death, which killed more than a third of Europe's population during the Middle Ages, or a more recent catastrophe, World War I, which resulted in 17 million killed and 20 million wounded. If that wasn't enough, nature brought on a flu epidemic in 1918, which killed between 50 and 100 million more. Not to be outdone, the death count for World War II, which started 21 years after the end of World War I, is estimated at 50 to 80 million, the worst war on record. And I don't want to talk about famines and droughts. They were common in the past, and they could come back. So it seems like nature keeps trying. Take nature's onslaught of recent diseases. For a while, it looked like Ebola, which is vicious and highly contagious, would do the job. If Ebola had happened 50 to 100 years ago, it would have spread like wildfire, and there's nothing we could have done about it. Ebola was first detected in 1976 and was not eradicated until this year, and the death rate ran between 25 and 90%. Another one is HIV/AIDS, and that still goes on. So anyway, don't think that nature might not try again, and maybe we won't be able to stop it. The latest is the Zika virus, which to date is now in 30 countries and could affect 4 million people, according to Health Canada. The U.S. Centers for Disease Control states there is no vaccine or medicine for Zika. Thus, it really does seem like nature is some kind of a force trying to stop the current explosion in human population by getting humans to start wars and helping along by introducing new diseases for which there is no cure. But nature faces a problem. Human population growth is immense and it counters nature's attempts. There's nothing in humanity's past to compare with the growth of population in the last 100 years. According to the UN, world population grew from 1.6 billion in 1900 to 7.3 billion in 2015, and the world population is currently growing at 83 million a year. In the late 1920s, it took 127 years for the population to go up by 1 billion. And in 1960, it only took 33 years for the population to go up by 1 billion. And in 2001, it took 12 years to go up by 1 billion. At the end of the day today, the world will have grown by 219,000 in just 24 hours. But when you look at world population, it seems almost hard to believe because it looks flat for the last 2,000 years. When it hits 1800, it starts to bobble up. And by 1900, the world population seems to go up like that. Some people say it looks like a hockey stick. I think it's more like straight up. And boy, that's scary. We've got a lot of people on this planet, and I don't know what's going to happen with those numbers. They will keep going up. Okay, to nature, if we think about nature as some kind of force or whatever, The human experiment would appear as if it had recently created a creature called humanity, and that creature had gotten way out of control. Just think, over millions and millions of years, nature has created such a massive variety of life, ranging from an ant to an elephant, a crab to a whale, and we're in between, but we have a better brain, and that's really what makes us different. Actually, our bigger brain has allowed us to wipe out or decimate many other species, plant and animal. Mankind has taken control of the earth instead of being just one species among many. In trying to restore some kind of balance, nature seems to be trying to use disease to kill us off, or is trying to get humans to do the job on their own. If nature makes humans despise each other even more, we could perhaps have more wars, even a nuclear war, and that would knock us way back, some say back to the Stone Age. But somehow it does seem like nature is aware it's spanned a destructive human race and that things have gotten out of balance. At least that's nature's balance. So maybe we should think of nature as some kind of a god. And there are some precedents for that. Well before the advent of Christianity, most people in Greece and Rome believed in the whole panoply of gods, not just one. And some of those were natural, such as Poseidon, the sea god, and Zephyrus, the god of wind. And so the Greeks even had gods for different wind directions. But anyway, so a long time ago, the idea that God or gods were actually natural forces, and they dominated human life, was well known and accepted. So to come back to the present, when nature seems to be recovering the stature it once had, it's entirely possible to see God and nature the same way. However, I need to draw a comparison between the growth of environmentalism over the past 40 to 50 years and philosophical views of God and nature. For example, naturalism is a concept that only natural forces operate in the world, that there is no God. Pantheism is the idea that God and nature are identical, or much the same. This is a view which was advanced by Spinoza. The essence of pantheism is a profound reverence for nature, and some pantheists use the word God to describe that reverence. But these concepts are indeed philosophical ideas, and they're not entirely reflective of the environmental age which I just described. And these philosophical ideas are not widespread. Conventional religions such as Christianity, Islam, and Eastern religions are widespread. On the other hand, environmentalism is a very active force indeed and has resulted in major social, legislative, and economic changes throughout the world, all undertaken irrespective of most religious views. This is because humanity's understanding of nature has changed. And that change is not based on a theory, it's based on a reality. Humanity now understands how growth in numbers and lifestyles affect nature. And humanity has started on the road to reduce those impacts, and in so doing has created a wide concern and understanding of nature, one that did not exist before. My view is simple. Society's current increasing concern for nature, accompanied by the understanding of the impacts that humans have upon it, could inspire a more widespread worldview that God and nature are much the same thing. Now, many theologians would dispute that concept as not in keeping with what's revealed in the Bible or the Quran, but the concept of God is a human idea, a human concept that has gone through many iterations and changes over many, many centuries and has resulted in different forms of religious belief. Despite all that, today, environmentalism spreads everywhere and thrives regardless of religious orthodoxy. So in time, can reverence for nature become a counter to religious orthodoxy, a different form of belief? To sum up, here are my thoughts. Nature is not a human concept. Nature is not a philosophy. Nature is not an idea. Nature is a reality. Nature exists whether humans exist or not. If you took away all the humans on Earth, nature would still exist. We humans are a product of nature, and nature deserves our understanding and respect. So, does nature deserve some form of reverence? Even a form of religious reverence? I think it's worthwhile thinking about and talking about. So when we get together this season, perhaps we might include nature in our conversations, comprehend its relation to all of humanity, and consider that nature and God are actually much the same thing. And so with that, I want to thank you for inviting me here to chat with you. I've really enjoyed it, and I hope you did too. Thank you.